Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from RAU'S IAS Study Circle. Join the official Telegram channel of RAU'S IAS Study Circle to stay updated and get all the materials on the Telegram. The link to the channel can be found in the description box. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading from a UPSC examination perspective. Now today let us take up the important news which has appeared in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 3rd June 2021. The news to be discussed has been displayed on your screen and time stamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So on this note, let's start our today's discussion from our UPSC Civil Services examination perspective. Now as a part of weekly mains answer writing from DNS articles, let's take up the question for this week. The question is, discuss the significance of proposed vehicle scrappage policy in India. And this question needs to be answered within 250 words. Now this particular question has been taken from the DNS of 22nd March 2021, where Vaibhav sir discussed in detail about vehicle scrappage policy. So before attempting this particular question, you can go through the DNS dated 22nd March 2021 in order to write this particular question based on the significance of proposed vehicle scrappage policy in India. So with this, let's take up the article for today's discussion. Now let's take up our first article for discussion, which appears as a lead article on page number 6. This article says, adverse changes, federalism imperilled. There needs to be a federal coalition to preserve the idea of a plural India in terms of culture and politics. So this article basically highlights about the aspect of growing centralization over a period of years, especially under the present government. And it is here where the article suggests that Union, through this concept of growing centralization, is trying to enter into the arena or jurisdiction of states. Now the Constitution of India provides for a federal structure as envisaged in the Constitution of India through Article 1 and also through Article 246, containing different lists under which states and union can make laws with respect to their jurisdiction as provided under this list contained in the 7th schedule to the Constitution of India, namely the union list, state list and the concurrent list. And it is here where the article suggests that central government is entering into the arena of health and agriculture, which is mainly a state subject. Now UPSC in the past, especially in the mains examination, has asked number of questions on the aspect of Indian federalism. So in this regard, we must know the basic features of federalism. So a federal state is one which provides for a written constitution. Its constitution is not only written but also rigid. It means that its provisions cannot be easily amended. So, provision with respect to 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution, which provides for various entries under the state list, cannot be amended through a simple majority. Next, the Constitution provides for division of powers between the center and states, especially with respect to their legislative functions, executive functions, and also financial functions and powers. And lastly, a federal state provides for an independent judiciary, so that in case of tussle between center and states or between different states, the independent judiciary can look into such matters. And as per the Constitution of India, it provides for original jurisdiction of Supreme Court in this regard. So these can be said to be the aspect of features with respect to Indian federalism, and all these aspects has been provided under the Indian Constitution, especially with respect to division of powers and independent judiciary. Now earlier I mentioned about Article 1 and 246. Now it's important to note that Article 1 comprises of Part 1, which mentions about union and its territory, and it says that India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states, and the territories of India shall comprise territories of states, union territories specified in the first schedule, and such other territories as may be acquired. Further, it provides for admission or establishment of new states, and it also provides for formation of new states and alteration of areas, boundaries or names of existing states. So in order to maintain the federal structure or also to meet regional demands, central government has the power to create new state or union territory. Next, regarding distribution of powers, this part has been provided under Part 11, which mentions about relations between union and the states, and here it mentions about the legislative relations and distribution of legislative powers. Now two articles, namely 245 and 246, becomes important here. 245 says extent of laws made by parliament and by the legislature of states. So it says that parliament may make laws for the whole or any part of the territory of India, and the legislature of a state may make laws for the whole or any part of the state. Now Article 246 mentions about subject matter of laws, where it highlights that Parliament has exclusive power to make laws with respect to any matters enumerated in List 1 in the 7th schedule, and also with respect to any matter enumerated in List 3. Now regarding List 3, that is concurrent list, even the state governments are empowered, as the Constitution says that Parliament and also the legislature of any state also have power to make laws with respect to any matters enumerated in List 3, that is in the concurrent list in the 7th schedule. So these provisions of the Constitution of India clearly mentions about a federal structure or a federal constitution. And it is here where this article mentions about a conflict between center and states, especially with respect to the federal structure as envisaged in the Constitution of India, as this article mentions about a growing centralization, or in a way reducing the space which has been given to state governments under the Constitution of India. So first of all, let us go through some of the important questions asked by UPSC in the mains examination in the past, and then we shall try to understand what exactly has been provided in this particular article from our examination perspective. Now I've taken these three questions asked in the year 2020, 2015 and 2014. The question asked recently in 2020 was, how far do you think cooperation, competition and confrontation? So mark these three words: cooperation, competition and confrontation. So the question says that how far do you think cooperation, competition and confrontation have shaped the nature of federations in India? Cite some recent examples to validate your answer. So basically it's trying to ask you that how has the nature of Indian polity or Indian federation developed over a period of years, and in this regard you can cite certain examples. So this question can be said to be a mix of current and basic concepts, as apart from asking about how Indian federation has shaped over a period of years, it is also asking about certain recent examples of the past. Now recent examples which could be quoted here was with respect to GST and compensation cess, with respect to finance commission, and also with respect to any boundary or river disputes between different states. Next, the question asked in 2015 was, the concept of cooperative federalism has been increasingly emphasized in recent years. Highlight the drawbacks in the existing structure and the extent to which cooperative federalism would answer the shortcomings. So here you need to mention about the aspect of cooperative federalism and also certain drawbacks in the existing structure as envisaged in the Constitution of India. And this question asked in 2014 stated that though the federal principle is dominant in our Constitution and that the principle is one of its basic features, but it is equally true that federalism under the Indian Constitution leans in favor of a strong center, a feature that militates against the concept of a strong federalism. So this question presents a paradox, as it states that though the federal principle is dominant in our Constitution, which we saw through Article 1 and 246, and that the principle is one of its basic features, as has also been stated by one of the important Supreme Court judgments, that federal structure is part of basic feature of the Indian Constitution and hence cannot be amended. However, it is equally true that federalism under the Indian Constitution leans in favor of a strong center. That is, the weight of center as per Indian federalism is stronger with respect to the different weights of states. And according to this question, it states that a feature that militates against the concept of strong federalism. So this question is trying to ask whether a strong center is against the principle of strong federalism. Indian federalism becomes an important topic to be understood from our examination perspective, as can be seen from these different questions. So based on this understanding basically of a friction between center and states regarding Indian federalism, let's go through the important aspects highlighted in this article, especially with respect to the aspect of increasing centralization, especially in the area of economy, legislature, society and culture, and also interference with institutions of India. Now, on the aspect of economic centralization, the point to be understood here is regarding fiscal federalism. Now, fiscal federalism can be said to be the fundamental aspect of our governance in the country, as also envisaged through the Constitution of India, as fiscal federalism provides autonomy to the states to raise revenue and also to undertake expenditure based on their priorities and needs. So, such a form of fiscal federalism has been formulated keeping in mind the diverse needs and aspirations of states across India and hence considered critical for a balanced and holistic development of the entire country. However, in recent years, it has been observed that fiscal federalism has become slightly skewed towards the center in certain aspects, and the same has been opposed by a number of states. So in this regard, let us understand the different issues which has arisen between center-state relationship, especially with the aspect of fiscal federalism. These aspects are higher share of cess and surcharges, GST compensation, centrally sponsored schemes, and borrowing powers of states. Now regarding cess and surcharge, both are imposed and collected by the center and do not form part of central divisible pool of taxes, and hence is not shared among states and continue to remain with the center. So over a period of time, the center has been imposing large number of surcharge and cess to mobilize revenue. Now an example in this point can be the recent introduction of the agricultural infrastructure cess in the union budget of 2021-22. Now another important point to be noted is that the share of cess and surcharge as a percentage of gross tax revenue of the center has increased sharply from 2.3% in the 1980s to the present 15% in 2019-20. So the states see this as an illegitimate way of depriving them of resources that is rightly due to them. So increase in number of cess and surcharge and also higher share of cess and surcharge collected by the center can be said to be one of the frictional area with respect to fiscal federalism. Now the second aspect is regarding the GST compensation. Now states earlier, in order to implement GST, agreed to give up the power to impose indirect taxes and thereby adopted GST on the basis of a guaranteed 14% growth in GST revenues per annum. And here the center also committed to pay the states for the shortfall in their GST revenue through the imposition of GST compensation cess. So the central government agreed to pay GST compensation cess in order to fill the gap of revenues of states with respect to collection of indirect taxes. So because of the pandemic, there was a shortfall of roughly around 3 lakh crores with respect to GST compensation cess for states. But center had only able to collect 65,000 crores. Hence, there was an obligation on the center to pay the remaining amount as part of GST compensation cess to states. Now, the center initially asked states to borrow from the market. However, due to strong opposition by the states, center themselves decided to borrow on behalf of the state and compensate them. Now, this issue of GST compensation cess has led to erosion of trust in fiscal federalism. The next point to be highlighted is regarding the centrally sponsored schemes. Now, in a centrally sponsored schemes, these schemes are financed by both the central government and the state governments in varying ratios, such as the ratio may vary from 70s to 30, that is 70% given by center and 30% given by states, 60-40 or even 50-50. However, these centrally sponsored schemes are implemented by respective state governments. And some of these schemes include NREGA, Ayushman Bharat, National Education Mission, etc. Now, another important point to be noted is that with respect to centrally sponsored schemes, rules and guidelines are provided or formulated by the central government. And these guidelines are regarding the implementation of these schemes. So basically the state governments have to follow these guidelines and rules in order to implement these centrally sponsored schemes. Now it is here where the state governments often claims that certain rules and regulations are difficult to implement, and overall these rules and guidelines curtail operational and financial autonomy of states. So at times state governments claim that these rules and guidelines at times do not provide them with enough financial and operational autonomy with respect to execution of these centrally sponsored schemes. So at times these centrally sponsored schemes faces opposition from different state governments. Now, there are also instances where the centrally sponsored schemes have also faced political controversy. For instance, some of the states such as West Bengal, Telangana, etc. have decided not to implement Ayushman Bharat scheme. Now, this is because these states claim that their own health insurance schemes are better than the center's Ayushman Bharat schemes. So, we also see friction between center and states, especially with respect to implementation of centrally sponsored schemes. Now, another area of friction between center and states is regarding the borrowing powers of states, as Article 293 of the Indian Constitution in a way limit the borrowing power of states and also give central government an effective control over states borrowing as per Article 293 of the Indian Constitution. So the article highlights that the executive power of a state extends to borrowing within the territory of India upon the security of the consolidated fund of the state. Now, Article 293 Clause 2 mentions about conditions which the Government of India can lay down on states with respect to their borrowings. So, overall, Article 293 allows states to raise loans from center or from the market. However, a state cannot raise public loan without the consent of the central government when there is still an outstanding part of any loan by the state. So if there is any outstanding loan by the state government, then the consent of the central government is important for that particular state to raise loans from the market. So through Article 293, center effectively controls the amount of public debt raised by the state governments. So because of these conditions laid down under Article 293, there have been frictions between states and center with respect to borrowing powers of the state government, and frictions have also risen over the recent past regarding center's attempt to perpetually control borrowings by the states. So overall, these can be said to be the areas where there is an increasing economic centralization, especially with respect to higher share of cess and surcharges, GST compensation, centrally sponsored schemes and borrowing powers of states, which in a way is limited under Article 293 of the Indian Constitution. Now, another area of concern with respect to increasing centralization is with respect to the legislative aspect and the aspect of institutional interference. Here, the article mentions about increasing use of institutions such as income tax, National Investigative Agency, CBI, etc. for political purpose or to serve political ends. Now, another area of concern as highlighted in this article is regarding the political appointments of head of the institutions such as CBI, NHRC, or even with respect to appointment of chancellors of various universities. Another area highlighted by this article is regarding the political appointment of governors, as it in a way also undermines state legislature. Further, this article highlights that in the area of health and agriculture, which is primarily a state subject as per the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution, central government has imposed strict laws. As in the areas of health, the central government in the first wave imposed a central lockdown, however resisted the effort during the second and more deadly wave. Now, regarding agriculture, the center passed laws on agriculture without states' consultation. So this in a way is overall undermining states' presence. And also with respect to education, this article highlights about the aspect of regional quota or reservation provided in colleges in order to meet regional demands. Now, regarding the aspect of society and culture, this article highlights that the diverse cultural foundations in India actually sustains federalism. And it is here where the importance of regional and sub-regional identities and culture becomes important. However, central government's imposition of Hindi through the idea of one nation, one language actually interferes with the socio-cultural foundation of federalisms, as India is a land of different cultures and even language. And this aspect of preserving cultural rights has been provided as a part of fundamental rights under Part 3 of the Indian Constitution. Now here Article 29 and 30 becomes important. Article 29 mentions about protection of interests of minorities. It says that any section of the citizens residing in the territory of India or any part thereof having a distinct language, script or culture of its own shall have the right to conserve the same. So Article 29 effectively talks about conservation of a distinct language, script or culture of a section of citizens residing in any part or territory of India. It further highlights that no citizen shall be denied admission into any educational institution maintained by the state or receiving aid out of state funds on grounds of religion, race, caste, language, or any of them. So state cannot differentiate on grounds of religion, race, caste, or even language with respect to admission of a citizen into any educational institution maintained by the state. Further, Article 30 also mentions about rights of minorities to establish and administer educational institution. Here it says that all minorities, whether based on religion or language, shall have the right to establish and administer educational institutions of their choice. So, Article 30 mentions about minorities based on religion and also language. So, we understand that Article 29 and 30 of Fundamental Rights provides for conservation of cultural and educational rights of minorities. Thus, overall, we can say that diverse cultural foundations of India sustains federalism as also supported through Article 29 and 30 of the Indian Constitution, which also forms part of fundamental right under Part 3 of the Indian Constitution. So these are some of the areas which highlights increasing centralization of the central government. Now regarding the syllabus, this topic gets covered under both prelims and mains examination. In the prelims examination, this topic gets covered under Indian polity and governance, and in the mains gets covered under GS paper 2 and also GS paper 1. Under GS paper 2, it gets covered under important features of the Indian Constitution and also issues and challenges pertaining to the federal structure and also devolution of powers and finances up to the local levels and challenges therein. And under GS paper 1, this topic gets covered under salient features of Indian society and also diversity of India. So after understanding about this very important article, especially with respect to growing centralization, let's move to the next article of discussion. Now the next news to be taken up appears on page number 8. It says, caste categories for NREGS pay. It will complicate payment system, may lead to a reduction in funding. Now according to this news, it highlights that Government of India has suggested for a split of MG NREGA payment, especially for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes people. Now this segregation has also been suggested by the Union government as they intend to prepare a separate budget heads with respect to SC and ST payment of categories under the MG NREGA. Now various experts have highlighted certain concerns with respect to this particular step taken by the Government of India. So the experts have highlighted number of concerns including complications in payment mechanism as this segregation of MG NREGA payment with respect to scheduled caste and scheduled tribe will make the entire payment mechanism more complex. Second concern is regarding reduction in funding. So experts believe that there might be reduction in funding with respect to overall MG NREGA funds, as it has been suggested that funds will only be allocated on the basis of job cards with SC and ST people on ground. So this has also led to concerns with respect to reduction in MG NREGA fundings in the future. The next aspect is regarding segregation of labor budget on the basis of caste. Now this has a tendency to create a separate class with respect to payment of wages, especially for SC and STs. And overall it can be said to be segregation of population by the government. So these are some of the concerns which has been highlighted by some of the experts with respect to split of MG NREGA payment for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes people. Now the MG NREGA Act provides for enhancement of livelihood security of the households in the rural areas of the country by providing at least 100 days of guaranteed wage employment in every financial year to every household whose adult members volunteer to do unskilled manual work. So some of the important highlights with respect to MG NREGA Act includes enhancement of livelihood security of households in rural areas of the country, and this will be done by providing at least 100 days of guaranteed wage employment in every financial year to every household whose adult members volunteer to do unskilled manual work. Now the MG NREGA Act also provides for a Central Employment Guarantee Council and also for a State Guarantee Council. So the functions of Central Employment Guarantee Council includes establishing a central evaluation and monitoring system, advising the central government on all matters concerning the implementation of this act, reviewing the monitoring and redressal mechanism from time to time, and also recommend improvements which is necessary, promote widest possible dissemination of information about the schemes which has been made under this particular act, monitoring the implementation of this particular act, preparation of annual reports to be laid before Parliament by the central government on implementation of this act, and any other duty or function which may be assigned to this particular council by the central government. And as of now, Minister of Rural Development is the chairperson of Central Employment Guarantee Council. Similarly, duties and functions of State Employment Guarantee Council includes advising the state government on all matters concerning the scheme and its implementation in the state, determining the preferred works with respect to NREGA, reviewing the monitoring and redressal mechanisms from time to time, and also recommending improvements with respect to the scheme, promoting the widest possible dissemination of information about this act, monitoring the implementation of this act and schemes in the state, and also coordinating such implementation with the central council, preparing the annual budget to be laid before the state legislature by the state government, and also any other duty or function which may be assigned to the state council by the central council or the state government. So with respect to NREGA, you must remember about the State Employment Guarantee Council and its functions, and also the Central Employment Guarantee Councils and its various functions. Now this topic becomes important both from the perspective of government schemes and the aspect of Indian economy. Hence, in the prelims, questions can be asked from the perspective of Indian polity and also the aspect of economic and social development. Whereas in the mains, questions can be framed under GS paper 2 with respect to government policies and welfare schemes for the vulnerable sections including laws, and also GS paper 3 with respect to aspects of Indian economy, inclusive growth and government budgeting. So with this discussion, let's take up the next article. Now let's take up this next news appearing on page number 14. It says, raise ethanol blending in surplus states. This news highlights that the Indian Sugar Mills Association has said that to achieve a target of 8 to 8.5% ethanol blending, it is important to increase the blending level to at least 12% in surplus states. Now here in this news, you need to understand about ethanol blending. Now ethanol blending simply means adding ethanol to either petrol or diesel. And this mixing of ethanol to petrol or diesel is done on a percentage basis. Now by adding this ethanol to petrol or diesel, it makes the petrol or diesel more efficient, especially for the vehicle. Now recently, the target to achieve ethanol blending has been advanced. Now last year in 2020, the government has set a target of 10% of ethanol blending by the year 2022 and 20% ethanol blending by the year 2030. But in early 2021, this target of 2030 was advanced to 2025. So according to the government, the target to blend ethanol, that is target to mix 20% of ethanol into petrol or diesel, was to be achieved by the year 2025. However, this target has also now been advanced to 1st April 2023. So this is also a very good news for these sugar mills. Now this is because sugar mills will produce ethanol through fermentation. Now it's also important to note that sugar cane and sugar beet are most commonly used as feedstocks, which is used to make ethanol through the process of fermentation. Now even corn is fermented to produce ethanol. So it is here where the government has advanced the target of ethanol blending to 20% by the year 2023. Now as already suggested that ethanol blending means blending of ethanol or mixing of ethanol with other relevant fuels to make them more energy efficient. So the question remains as to how this blending makes the fuel more energy efficient. Now we know that ethanol molecule contains oxygen, and this extra oxygen helps to completely combust the fuel, and this overall results in fewer emissions which overall reduce the environmental pollution. Now ethanol is also considered as a renewable fuel. Further, the ethanol blended petrol program was launched by the Government of India in January 2003. The program sought to promote the use of alternative and environment-friendly fuels and to reduce import dependency for energy requirements. Now regarding the importance of ethanol blending, we can say that it aims to provide green and clean alternative fuel source, and because of increased ethanol blending, it will overall help in reducing the high fuel imports, as India is third world's biggest oil importer, and India meets 85% of its oil demand through import. So, increased blending of ethanol into petrol and diesel will further reduce the burden of fuel imports, and overall will also help in reducing the emission of greenhouse gases from vehicles. Further, it will provide an alternative market for crops. It will benefit the farmers with income security and high returns, as the farmers will then grow such crops which will be used for ethanol blending. Crops such as corn, sugarcane, sugar beet, etc. Further, it will help to promote behavioral changes in fuel consumption. It will also raise spending on research and development with respect to ethanol blending. It will lead to better utilization of urban solid waste, as better research and development might lead to use of these urban solid waste to convert them into ethanol. And overall, these steps will lead to possible employment generation. Thus, these can be said to be the importance and benefits of ethanol blending in fuel. Now, this topic of ethanol blending gets covered with respect to Indian economy and also with respect to aspect of environment, and hence can also be covered under GS paper 3 with respect to the aspects of economy and also environmental pollution and degradation. So with this discussion, let's take up the last article. Now the next news appears on page number 14. It says that exports surged 67%, narrowing trade gap. Now deficit narrowed to 8-month low in May, and this helped in reduction in gold and oil imports. Now the Ministry of Commerce and Industry has recently published the preliminary foreign trade data for the month of May 2021. Now it's important to understand here is that UPSC does not ask questions based on monthly data. Rather, question is asked by UPSC on an yearly basis of data. Now let's take up this particular question asked by UPSC Prelims in the year 2020. So the question was, with reference to international trade of India at present, which of the following statements are correct? Options given were: first, India's merchandise exports are less than its merchandise imports. Yes, this statement is correct. Next, India's import of iron and steel, chemicals, fertilizers and machinery have decreased in recent years. No, this statement is incorrect, as it has not decreased. Third, India's exports of services are more than its imports of services. Yes, this statement is true. And fourth, India suffers from an overall trade current account deficit. Now, when you were attempting this question in the year 2020, then from such date, this particular statement was also correct. So according to the option, the correct answer was D. So regarding the merchandise trade, in the year 2020-21, there was decline in both exports and imports. However, the decline in imports was higher as compared to decline in exports. And because of this, it can be said that trade deficits with respect to 2020-21 for merchandise trade was lower in comparison to previous financial years. So overall, the situation has become better with respect to merchandise trade with respect to previous financial years. It further says that a lower trade deficit was accompanied by an increase in the export of software services. So export software services increased from India. So in this regard, we understand that statement 1 and statement 3 becomes correct. Now with respect to top 3 export commodities from India includes petroleum products, drug formulations, pearls and precious stones. And top 3 export destinations for India becomes US, China and UAE. Top 3 import commodities becomes crude oil, petroleum products and gold. And top 3 import sources becomes China, USA and UAE. So these are the 3 countries from where we import the most. Now regarding India's merchandise trade balance, the most favorable trade balance is with respect to United States, Bangladesh and Nepal, and highest trade deficits is with respect to China, then Iraq, followed by Saudi Arabia. Now these data-driven questions must be seen with the perspective of the financial years on which these questions are asked. So please attempt these questions very carefully. Now this topic can be said to be part of Indian economy. As you can see, a question has been asked by UPSC in the prelims examination. So with this, let's take up the question for the day. Now based on our discussion, let's take up this practice question which has been asked by UPSC in the past. The question is, which one of the following is not a feature of Indian federalism? Options are A. There is an independent judiciary in India. B. Powers have been clearly divided between the center and states. C. The federating units have been given unequal representation in Rajya Sabha. And D. It is a result of an agreement among the federating units. Now coming to the answer of yesterday, the question was, consider the following statements. Article 24 of the Indian Constitution says that no child below the age of 14 years shall be employed anywhere, and no person between 15-18 years shall be employed to work in any factory or mine or engage in any other hazardous employment. No, this statement is incorrect, as you can see that Article 24 does not provide for the second aspect. Second, India has ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Children in 1992. Yes, this statement is correct. So the question was, which of the above statements are correct? So the correct answer becomes B. So with this, we come to an end to today's discussion. Thank you for watching DNS.